So we have another second and last English session together, and most of the questions are in Thai, but I'll answer in English. And, there is an English, 2 or 3 English questions. How can we become more disciplined? Do you have any tips or a thought process or something that you do in your daily routine? Thank you so much for your help. Yeah, I think the particular way in which we instill discipline within ourselves will vary according to our personality and circumstance. There are some general points I could make. One, and it's a very important one for bringing about any kind of positive change in your life, whether it's being more disciplined or more punctual or whatever, right from the very basic elements of social life. And that is a particular way of reflecting, of thinking about this topic. And that is to reflect upon, think about all of the disadvantages and the difficulties and the suffering that you've experienced in your life because of a lack of that quality. So here we're talking about lack of discipline. And really, you don't try to push those things away, even if they're embarrassing or difficult. Sit down and write them out in a book, and really go through them. And then recognize that unless you really apply yourself, that's going to be the way your life is going to be. It's not going to change. If you don't bring about some inner change, then it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse. At least when you're young, you have teachers and parents and people who are giving you advice, maybe even nagging you. But maybe we don't like that or resent it. But it's better than what happens when you get older, because now there's nobody to tell you anymore. And as you get your householder yourself and having your own family or being positions of authority, particularly in Thailand, we know you get less and less feedback, less and less direct feedback. And so it's, particularly in this culture, it's very easy to get into bad habits and never think to shake them. Or not even to be aware, because nobody ever tells you, not to your face anyway. So really reflecting upon this, this is a problem that I see, and it's a problem because it gives rise to all these kinds of unfortunate, unpleasant things in my life, and it's not going to get better by itself. And then you take the other side and all the advantages that you can see in having more discipline, and reflect or remembering people who you admire who are self-disciplined. This two ways of thinking. It was just basically what we call pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages, or in Thai we say kun le thot. And you have to give time to that. It's not just, it really sucks when I don't have any discipline, and it would be great if I did. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about really going into it, and going into it regularly, because it's through reflecting on those two topics together, the disadvantages and the suffering of the present habit, and the advantages and the happiness that will come from acquiring that habit, that gives you the inspiration, the gamlang jai, the patience and the perseverance to stick with a program of making changes in your life. Now, one of the keys to making big changes in your life is to make them incremental. I don't know if you know that word, but that means just little by little by little. Like if you think you've got this big problem, and you've got to do something about it, and it's just so kind of depressing and intimidating and difficult, you just, I can't do that. No, I'm not. I just. So what you do is you just take one step at a time, and remember reading someone recounting doing counseling work in the States only with obese people, dangerously overweight. And this particular woman, like many people, I really would like to lose weight. I would like to, but just can't. It just doesn't have the discipline. And the doctor was giving various programs. Look, you need to swim, or you need to do this so many times a week. And yes. She comes back the week after. Did you do it? Well, no. And this is very, very common, isn't it? And so he applies this technique, and he said, look, could you exercise for 30 seconds a day in front of the television? 30 seconds. Can you make a 30-second a day commitment? And the woman just sort of, I could do that, 30 seconds. And you see, there's an idiom in English we say like thin end of the wedge, which means you just start off with something very, very small. But then once you do that, you feel, I can do this. And then you take another little step and another little step until you gradually are able to do more and more. So when you see it as like as a really big problem, and it's been such a part of your life for so long, you just don't know where to start. And so it's like all or nothing. So you end up doing nothing. So what you do is you change your perception of the problem. And you just say, what can I do? Like, what's the smallest thing I could do? And this principle is applied is a Japanese management philosophy, which, strangely enough, it sounds very Japanese, but it's originally devised in America in the Second World War to raise production in the war effort. But it's like if you're in a business and you sit down and you ask every single person, what is the smallest thing, just one small thing, very practical thing that we could do today to make this a better company or to make this a better community? We're not talking about really big ideas, we should be more this, we should be more that, but what is that one very practical, simple thing that would just improve the quality of our life together? You see, so the idea is you start off like on the micro level and then you work up from that. So those are two pieces of advice. One is creating this gamlang jai and this willingness just to bear with the difficulties of making a change through this reflection on the disadvantages of the present habit and the advantages of the wished for habit. And secondly, to create a program for yourself in which you start off in very modest, very small way. Like say people with writer's block, you said, you can't get any words down on paper, because it's just such a big thing. And then you say, well, okay, I'm going to write for 5 minutes a day. I'm not going to say I've got to sit for hours and do, and so I'm just start off with 5 minutes a day, and then you just break the ice, you see, and you create a new perception. Some other, sort of secondary things you can do. I think there's a lot of ways in which social media can be used in a positive way, rather than just keeping in touch and chatting. But if you have friends also who have the same problem, would also like to be more self-disciplined, then creating like a line community, and then keep in touch. And when you're having difficulties, you have someone who's doing the same thing that can help you, and you can help them when they're struggling. And using that social support that is possible through modern media to help you when you take on these kinds of challenging projects. Okay. Okay, slight change of topic. Could you please explain the differences between the Theravada and Mahayana traditions? Okay, obviously it's rather complex and topic, and one which is there are different views about this. So first of all, you need to understand that it isn't really such a correct comparison, in that Mahayana is not a tradition in the way that Theravada is. The word Mahayana is like an umbrella term. It covers many different kinds of Buddhism under one big term. So there's not sort of one Mahayana view on this topic or that topic. There's one Theravada view, and then there are many different views of Buddhist traditions within the Mahayana group. Okay. So, although if you look at the statistics for the number of people in the world who follow the Theravada and the Mahayana, then you say, there's Mahayana, more Mahayana. But if you break down the Mahayana into the different groups and different traditions, then Theravada comes out as the most popular. The Theravada tradition is one which spread southwards from northeastern India, where the Buddha lived, and after flourishing in South India for some time, its main stronghold, its main area of influence was Sri Lanka. And the Theravada Buddhism that we follow in Thailand was, say, imported from Sri Lanka. Now, before that was the case, and now we're talking about 1,000 years ago, there were Buddhist monks coming over from the Andaman Sea, from India, right from perhaps the time of the Emperor Asoka, and in the time of the Dwaravati civilization. And towards the end of the Cambodian or Khmer period of influence Because don't forget, nearly all of Isan and most of north central Thailand was part of the Khmer Empire at that time. And so we have all these Khmer temples throughout the country, like in Korat at Pimai, for instance. And at the end, towards the end of the Khmer period, of course that's the time when Angkor Wat and all these other places were built, then Mahayana Buddhism, imported from India, was starting to have an influence. So from early days where there are like Theravada, Mahayana, then the real turning point in Thailand came about with the establishment of the kingdom of Sukhothai. And at that time, there was communities of forest monks living in Nakhon Si Thammarat who had ordained, become monks and trained in Sri Lanka, and then they would come back to Thailand afterwards, or to what was then called Nakhon Si Thammarat. And the first king of Sukhothai, he was inspired with the forest monks and the meditation monks. And so he sent an invitation to this community of forest monks in Nakhon Si Thammarat to come to Sukhothai and to establish the Theravada Buddhist tradition in Sukhothai. So there was a pre-existing Theravada group of monks originally from Pugan or Pagan. But it was somewhat corrupt at that time, and the first king of Sukhothai, starting a new, the first independent Thai kingdom, and wanted a form of Buddhism which he felt had integrity and was inspiring. And so the first community, the first monastery established at that time in Sukhothai was the forest monastery. And if you go to Sukhothai, you'll see that many of the Buddhas sculpted and founded in Sukhothai are in meditation postures. So Buddha images are many different styles and postures, but the Sukhothai Buddhas are usually in meditation posture. So the Theravada tradition is based upon certain principles. One is that the teachings of the Lord Buddha, which were recorded, were recited and recorded at the first council. That's a big meeting shortly after the Buddha passed away, are complete. Nothing needs to be added to them or taken away, and that that all is left is for us to study and practice and realize the truth of them. So we can say that the Theravada tradition is the conservative tradition. That's to say, it sees its role as conserving the Buddha's teachings, which were already laid down in their entirety. Now, after the Buddha passed away, that time there was no Theravada, of course, but different groups of monks started to lead their own different groups based upon different attitudes. For instance, one of the first causes of argument or dissension was concerning the monks' discipline, the Vinaya. And one of the first main arguments, and it's one that's gone on ever since, concerns the rule forbidding monks from touching money or using money. And already within some years of the Buddha passing away, a lot of monks felt that was impractical and didn't really work, and monks just had a little bit of money just for what they needed, it would be better. And so there were a number of different points of the monks' discipline that led to a split. And then because the monasteries were spread out over hundreds of miles or kilometers, and there was very little communication between them, then there was different kind of styles and emphasis, and so it's not really correct to call them sects in the way that you would call, say, groups in Islam or Christianity sects, because it wasn't so much they had different beliefs, it was just different styles, and if there were differences, it was in the Vinaya. So many different groups emerged, and then after about 500 years, what we call Mahayana really started to develop, and number of texts appeared which were called sutta or sutras, Sanskrit, and they were all saying, and the Buddha said this and the Buddha said that, and so the conservatives would say, no, he didn't say that, that was never recorded after the Buddha passed away, you've written that yourself, you see. And so the reply to this was that at the time of the Buddha, there were certain very profound teachings which the Buddha felt his disciples were not ready to understand, and so he taught them to the devas, and told the Tevada, just to keep these, and then in the future, when these really smart people are born who can understand this, then pass this on. So they're saying this is why, it says these are teachings of the Buddha, but they don't, they've just suddenly appeared because they were with the Devada all this time. So this is like a faith of the Mahayana monks. But if we look at the Mahayana texts, which are called suttas or sutras, it's very clear that the philosophy behind them varies from text to text, whereas the suttas in the Pali Canon, in the Pratraipitok, are very clearly one voice. You can pick up any book. Yes, it's the voice of the Buddha. It's the same way of talking. So, from a Theravada point of view, the teaching that we think of with regard to the Mahayana Sutta is the one in which the Buddha picked up a handful of leaves, and he asked his disciples, which is more, the leaves in my hand or the leaves in the forest? And of course his disciples said, well, the leaves in the forest are so many more than the ones in your hand. And the Buddha said that the Buddha knows so many things, so many things, like all the leaves in the forest, but he doesn't teach all those things. He just takes up the handful of things, only those things that will lead you to enlightenment, to peace and wisdom. So in the Theravada tradition, we say, all these different profound philosophies and everything, we're not saying that they're untrue, we're just saying they're not necessary, because the Buddha has already picked out the ones that we need to know, and life's too short, to have to study all that. Okay, this is a very big topic, and maybe one or two other points. The Mahayana tradition was very successful in spreading throughout the world because it was what we could call a liberal tradition rather than a conservative tradition, if we can use those two terms. And that meant that when the monks from India went to China and to Korea and to Tibet and all these places, then they were willing to adapt to the cultures of the countries they found themselves in. And their idea was that you would just keep like the essence of the teachings, but in the minor things, we should be willing to adapt in order to be able to share the Buddha's teachings with as many people as possible. So this meant it was a very, it's been called by one scholar a very portable religion. And so Buddhism spread, along the Silk Road and into Pakistan and Afghanistan and all those Stan countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, even Iran was a Buddhist country for some time, Mahayana Buddhist, before it was converted to Islam. So very, very flexible. But of course, the question with that kind of policy or idea is, who decides what's the essence and what's not, what you can let go and what you keep on? Who decides? You see, because it's not always so clear. And so when we get to like Japan is a good example, then there are Buddhist sects in Japan whose basic ideas and philosophy is so far from the original Buddhism of India that it's almost a different religion. So, for instance, like about, I guess, 800-900 years ago, then the Pure Land sects, Nichiren and all these different and various religious figures came, and they believed that this was a time of corruption, and that people no longer have the barami to become enlightened. And it's very arrogant to think that you do have that, and you should be just humble and accept that. And so you pray to Buddha, Amitabha Buddha. And then the idea is, if you pray very sincerely to Amitabha Buddha, then after you die, you go and live in the Pure Land with Amitabha Buddha, and then you can meditate, and then you can get enlightened. So in this lifetime, it's a life of, monks don't need to lead a celibate, like monks should get married and just lead a normal life and be humble, and everyone should just pray to Amitabha Buddha. So it's very similar to Christian or any religion where you pray to God. And the characteristic ideas, like fundamental idea of Theravada is confidence in your own capacity or potential for enlightenment, whether you're a man or a woman or wherever you come from. And that's not something that you lose, because if you're a human being, that means whatever period of history you're born in, as long as you've got a body and mind, you have the capacity for enlightenment. And so that idea was discarded in some Japanese sects. And then in each country, the Buddhism adopted some of the ideas and culture of the countries that they spread into. So in Mahayana Buddhism, like this Jangme Guan Im and worship of bodhisattvas. And so this human beings tend to want to worship things and ask for things, and in Theravada, then we don't agree with that. So if you want to go and if you really want to go and bow to something and make offerings and then ask to, pass all your exams or have a baby or something, then go and do it with a Hindu shrine. Don't do it with a Buddhist shrine, because it's nothing to do with Buddhism. But in Mahayana, then there's this sort of all these bodhisattvas, and you can pray to bodhisattvas and ask them to help you do this and do that. So the idea of the meaning of the word Buddha changed. In Theravada teaching, there's just one Buddha at one time. So now we're in the era where there is Gautama Buddha, Jauchai Siddhartha. He became the Buddha. But in Mahayana philosophy, Buddha just means changed its meaning to mean the highest level of attainment. So in Theravada, this is the highest thing that you can realize. You become an arahant. But in the Mahayana, the idea, or particularly in the Vajrayana, which development from it is that you can become a Buddha. I was in Tibet, in eastern Tibet, a few months ago, I told you, and all the villagers were coming out of their houses and they're all saying, "Oh, a living Buddha, a living Buddha." So, no, I'm a living Buddha. So that's their way of, if it was Isan or somewhere like this, very faithful villagers, they would say, "Oh, prapatipati patipacha." But in that culture, they would say, "Oh, he's a living Buddha." You see, so they have a different idea of what Buddha means. So many of the key technical terms are understood in different ways. And even in the Mahayana tradition itself, many differences. So, I could talk for all day on this, so maybe I'll just leave that one for now. Okay. I'm giving precedence to English questions. Okay. It's an English one. It's a Thai one. Okay, another change of pace. I'm in a long-distance relationship and everything is going well, but there are times when I really miss my partner. Could you give any advice on how to deal with strong emotions of this kind? I think that I think it's generally agreed that long-distance relationships are tough. But having said that, probably easier these days than ever before in history. Because when you miss someone, you can just Skype them. And so, when I was young, or for hundreds of years before that, that would be like magic. So you can Skype people, you can phone people, you can text people, so it's not so bad, is it? But it's whatever. I mean, it's difficult, and there are times when strong feelings of missing someone, or they're over there and you don't know what they're getting up to, and maybe they're seeing somebody else, and how would you know? And all these kinds of thoughts that can go through your mind. Let me tell you, this isn't really, the same, but when I was a young monk, then so many people, Western monk in forests in northeast Thailand, the forest monastery was still quite new, and people were very excited and couldn't, because family is so strong and important in Thailand. The idea of leaving your family and coming and living the other side of the world and not having any contact or very little contact with. I think I was here for few years before I was able to make a telephone call home. I used to write like aerogram letters once every couple of weeks. But so people would often ask, คิดถึงบ้านไหม and I didn't. I wasn't homesick, not at all. That might have been because I left home when I was very young, when I was 17, and I never really ever felt at home in England anyway. But I appreciated the fact that we have two words in Thai. One is kittung, and the other one is reluktung. So I would tell people, no, ไม่คิดถึงบ้านแต่ reluktung. So if you, Luang Po Chai, Ajahn Chai used to say, คิดถึงเป็นทุกข์นะ So, but when you reluktung, you don't feel sad. When you reluktung, you think about the things that you love and appreciate in the people you've left behind or the people who are living far away at that time, and you feel grateful for those things and for what you've received from those people in the case of your parents. But when you kittung, that means that you're in a battle against nature. If you ever heard the story about the King of England, King Canute, he was so the story being that he was so convinced he was all powerful, they took him to the beach, and tell the sea to stop the tide from stop coming in. Even a king can't do that. And if you're living in different countries and different continents and just constantly raging against that and regretting it, and then you're just fighting against nature, and it's like this. It's this way. This is how it is, and it's this way you've chosen it. You're not being forced to have a long-term relationship. You want to have it. That's why you have it, because you want it. But I think it's a mistake to think that being in love makes you happy. There's happiness, of course, otherwise people wouldn't fall in love. But there's always a shadow to it. Even if whether you're living together or you're living far away from each other, there's always pain of one level or another involved in loving somebody. And if you don't have too unrealistic expectations of love, you see, love is wonderful. It's great to love someone and be loved, but it's not roses all the way, and it's, never has been, never will be. And there is always this kinds of pain, and the pain of separation, that is not necessarily a geographical problem. That's to say, you could be living with someone in the same house or see them every day, and then you have an argument, and you just can't bear to speak to that person, and you just feel as like you're miles and miles. You could be on different continents. There's just no connection, no communication, and there's that sense of grief when that happens, when you just can't explain yourself, or you can't understand, or they can't understand you. So that's part of life, isn't it? So recognizing, this is what it's like. It's like this, and not making it worse than it is by fighting against it. So the Buddha gave a example, like when something bad happens or something unpleasant. He compares it like being shot with an arrow. And he said that being shot by an arrow is bad enough. But when you don't accept the truth of things, when you're fighting against things, and when you're allowing your mind just to go round and round and round, it's like you put poison on the arrow. So it makes it so much worse than it needs to be. So the most direct answer to this question is really what we're doing. Meditation practice is how you develop mental strength and resilience, and you begin to understand how emotion works, and you don't identify with emotion in the same way. It's not that you don't want emotion and you just shut yourself down and become like a rock, and that's not what meditation is about. But it means that you realize that the meditation, the storm, this emotion, if you can say, is like a storm. If you imagine the ocean and there's a storm, and then the water at the top level, the surface level of the ocean is, huge waves and commotion. But then when you go down below the level of the, down some meters, some yards, then the water is very still. So there are two things going on. The surface level of the ocean is full of fire, commotion, and huge waves and so on. But you go down, and it's not that way at all. And in meditation, you develop this. Although there are emotions arising and passing away, at the same time, you have the sense of this like body of the ocean, which doesn't change. So you have both the changes of emotion and then the side which doesn't change together. And it means that you want to become without emotion, obviously, but you don't experience it in the same way. And this is something that you can develop through meditation. Okay. Okay, I think we're at the end of English. Oh, here's another English. Okay, this is a meditation question. So I'll try to avoid technical language. What are the jhanas, inภาษาไทยว่าฌาน, and how can they be attained through meditation? Are they stepping stones towards attaining nibbana? Okay, so very simply, the paths of meditation, if you take a meditation object, you immediately encounter difficulties. And there are 5 main kinds of obstacles that arise during this first period of meditation. And it's not an initial thing. It takes years or your whole lifetime to deal with these. But the first kind of obstacle is when your mind just wants to think about things that we enjoy thinking about. So you get bored with the meditation and you want to be thinking about holidays and going shopping and food and boyfriends and girlfriends and, things that when you think about them, it's like really sanuk and really plurn, you see. So that's one obstacle. The second one is like negativity, and it can be you're sitting there and suddenly you just think about what somebody did and somebody said and how much you hate them, and then all these kinds of negative thoughts. Or it can just be little ordinary aversions, it's too hot, it's too cold, it's too early, it's too late, I'm too hungry, I'm too full, I'm this and that, and why is he like this, and why is she like that, and why do we have to do this, and all that kind of negative commentary in your mind. That's the second obstacle. The third one is sleepiness and dullness and laziness. And the fourth is mental agitation and anxiety and guilty feelings. And the fifth is doubt and confusion. So these, what we call the niwārna, or niwarana or niwārna, are the work that you're doing in meditation, learning to see these things, learning how to deal with them. So if you persevere, these hindrances become weaker and weaker until eventually they disappear. So that's when the 5 hindrances are absent, when there are no hindrances in the mind. This is the first stage of samadhi. Okay. Now, at this stage, apart from the absence of the hindrances, then the mind is almost automatically focused on the meditation object, and it focuses and it penetrates the meditation object almost effortlessly, and there's a sense of joy and well-being and unity in the mind. Now these characteristics or features of the mind become stronger and stronger until we reach when they become stabilized. Then the mind is said to enter into the first jhana or chan. Now, following this, as meditation develops, there is a process by which the mind becomes more and more subtle. And that means the coarser elements of the first jhana disappear. And that here is two, is called vitakka and vichara. Now in Thai, this is usually translated as vitok vijan, but you have to understand that doesn't mean like vitok and vijan as we would use those words everyday language. These are special meaning. So it means that there's no longer, with these two disappear, there's no longer a sense of you're concentrating or you're focusing on an object. The mind is still, and there's inner silence. And so now the factors of rapture or joy and well-being and unity of mind become very clear. Then as the meditation progresses, that was the second jhana. Third jhana, the sense of rapture and joy disappears because it's still kind of an excitement of the mind. And then there's the deep, very profound sense of happiness or well-being. And then that fades away. And the mind attains the fourth jhana, in which there's usually at this point, there's no sense, you don't even feel there's any breath anymore, there's no body anymore, there's nothing, there's just a sense of knowing, there's just the mind, like pure mind. And so coming out of that, one of those jhanas into the pre-jhana state, then the mind is very, very powerful. And that is the time in which the practice of vipassana can be pursued most effectively. So the role of jhana or samadhi is that it prepares the way for the wisdom faculty to penetrate the 3 characteristics, Trailak, Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta. So it's not that jhana in itself is nibbana, but it gives the mind the strength and the brightness and the sharpness and the clarity which enables vipassana. Okay, so that's a technical term. So we're going from long-term relationships to Mokka Nibbana and back again. So this is Okay. Yes, at last, a question about ghosts. I thought Okay, there's two questions here. Once, is there a spiritual world? If so, what is it like? Well, yeah, that's a very vague title, isn't it? A spiritual world. There are many kinds of beings which we are not, as usual, normal human beings, able to see and hear, and that's not, I think, difficult to understand if we compare with just on a more mundane level. Animals like dogs. Dogs can hear things that we can't hear, and there's very many animals that can see things that we can't see. Because our ears can only hear a certain range of sounds, and other animals can hear a larger range. So there are all kinds of things, sounds and sights that we can't see, we can't register, simply because we don't have the instruments. Our senses are not sensitive enough. But that, of course, doesn't mean that they're not there. And some people can see spirits and things, and without any meditation training, and this is usually just something that they've a gift that they've inherited from past life. Some people, some monks, some nuns, some meditators are able to perceive spirits and so on. But this isn't really the most important point. The important point is, how should we relate to spirits and things? Because also, before I go on to that point, it's true that some people do see spirits, but a lot of people see things which they say are spirits and they're not, as you know. So, maybe 90% is upatan. Yeah. So, having said that there are spirits doesn't mean that every time someone says they see one, that they do. Often they can be mentally ill, or there's just, just through power of thought or brungdang, or they watch too many ghost movies. And, but the important thing as Buddhists, is that we don't see these beings as anything special. They're just fellow travelers, if you like. Or in the Buddhist idiom, we say they're companions in birth, old age, sickness and death. เป็นเพื่อนเกิดแก่เจ็บตาย. And we don't think that they have some special power that we can offer them pig's head or something like that, then ask for all kind of special favors, because even if you can, they say, even if you can contact someone from the spirit realm, okay, and they say, I'm Rachaganti Ha, or I'm Queen Cleopatra or something like that. How do you know they're telling the truth? Why is it that, when people do, khao song or something, it's always like really famous people, It just seems to me just a little bit unlikely, and how can you trust these kinds of, how could you trust anybody who takes a bribe, Because that's basically what you're trying to do when you make offerings. You're offering a bribe. So basically, if there are the spirits, the ones that you're contacting are the corrupt ones who take bribes, you see. And how can you believe what they say? So it's better to keep an open mind. In both ways. Yeah, there are such things. There are beings that we can't see, people tend to be afraid about this, but there are all kinds of things that we can't see. Like radio waves and all kinds of radiation and stuff. But why do we think that these things are malevolent or they're going to do something to us? I mean, certainly in the case of people trying to lead a good life, then the kind of unseen beings that are going to have any effect at all are going to be the devas, not the pea or things that are frightening and malicious. Like the Tevada are really drawn. It's like goodness is a magnet for Tevada. They love goodness and kindness, and they are able, in certain cases, to provide some protection. But it's not something that we need to really think about very much. You just do what's the right thing to do, and that's a protection against malevolent forces and a drawing of positive energy to you. To what extent that is present and exists, we don't know. But basically, whether there are or are not such beings, the way that you live your life shouldn't be affected by that. Because if you're trying to lead a good life, whether or not there are unseen beings, you'll receive the benefits from that. If you're leading an unskillful and foolish life, whether or not there are unseen beings, you'll receive the fruits of that. And none of these beings are going to be able to prevent that happening. Okay, how many of you have seen a ghost? Anybody? No. How many of you are afraid of ghosts? Yes. Okay. ธรรมดาถ้าเราโกหกเพื่อให้อีกฝ่ายสบายใจขึ้นจะถือว่าบาปไหมครับ So I've already explained this point, I think, that how we decide on something is bāp or not is by looking at the intention. So what is the intention here? So somebody might say, well, the intention is tell a white lie so as not to hurt someone's feelings or to make them feel better. But no, the actual intention is not that. The actual intention is to say something that you know is not true. So whenever, for whatever reason, you say something that you know is not true, then that is bāp. Okay? It might not be, in this case, if you have, you want to save somebody embarrassment or pain, then it's be very weak bāp or padkamma, but it's still bāp because you have the intention to lie. Now this idea that that you have a choice, you have two choices. This is a false dilemma. The idea you have one, you tell the truth and that person's upset, or two, you tell a lie and they're happy. So which do you do? But that's not the case. So if you're practicing the Dhamma, then it's a challenge to your wisdom. So what you're thinking in your mind is, you're not thinking, shall I tell a lie and keep them happy, or should I tell them the truth and risk them being upset? yeah, I do like your hair in that style. It's lovely. No, you see, you do. What you do is you ask yourself, how can I, one, tell the truth or not tell a lie, and two, avoid hurting that person's feelings. You see, it's not a either-or situation. It's a false dilemma. So this is, how can I respond in a way that I don't lie and I don't hurt that person's feelings? Okay? So it's not so easy. That's why it's a training. That's why it's a kind of education. So let's see. Someone has their hair cut and you think, oh, and they say, do you like it? What would you say? Okay, ask the boys. Your girlfriend cuts her hair. And she says, what do you think? Who's got a good answer? Or maybe you like it. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's anybody other girls can answer. You know, if your boyfriend has haircut, then.
If you like it, then I like it too.
Okay, that's a good one. My experience is they won't accept that one. I remember trying that one out myself. Yeah. Anybody? Or somebody takes hours cooking you a meal, you know, and, you know, you can hardly get it down your throat, and they say, is it delicious? So what do you say? Yeah, okay, I'm not putting you on the spot, but you just give it some thought, you know, because it's not the case that you have to lie to tell someone, to keep somebody happy in that way. You know, be skillful, be thoughtful. And the taught, you see, the disadvantage is that there are a number of disadvantages. One is, you know, who decides what's a white lie? You know, when does a white lie become a grey lie, and when does a grey lie become a black lie? You know, where's the boundary? You know, and sometimes, you know, you say, it's just to keep them happy. You know, not afraid you'll hurt their feelings. But often you're not being honest with yourself. It's just because you feel awkward, or you feel anxious, or you're worried they won't like you so much, or you have a certain image, and so there are all kinds of other things that are coming to play a role here. And the other thing is that any kind of relationship, you know, what it needs more than anything else, I think, in long term, is trust. You know, if you lose your trust in somebody, you know, you can never really feel at ease. You can never really feel comfortable in any real way. And so, if you find someone you love lies to you, even if, you know, you think, yeah, it's quite likely it's just a white lie. But you can't forget that, because you know, he or she is someone who will, under certain circumstances, tell me a lie. And then, you know, you can't help thinking, well, if they're willing to lie about this, then maybe they're willing to lie about something else. If they're willing to lie about small things, maybe in certain cases where there's a lot of pressure, or they're really afraid that they'll lose us or something, maybe they lie about important things, you see. So it's just like a little crack in the dam wall, you know, just one little lie, when it's discovered, then it can change a whole relationship. Just one small thing can have a huge effect, you know. And so this is why in relationships telling the truth is so important. And I'm not saying that you should tell everything, because some things you don't need to share. They're private, and maybe you have some strong feeling. And if you, this is one of the values of a long-distance relationship. You have a strong feeling, and then by the next time you Skype, you've forgotten about it. But if you're with somebody, in the moment, you have to feel honest. I have to really say, I'm really angry with you about this. I really, and something really small becomes something very big. So being honest doesn't mean you have to reveal everything that happens, everything you think and feel. But it means not lying and distorting and exaggerating and hiding things from each other. And that's how trust is developed. And what could be better? What could be more valuable than to have somebody? I could trust that person with my life. Do you know people like that? You could say, I know that I can trust that person with my life. And this is one of the things that wonderful things about becoming a monk. You say, oh yeah, monks are quite tough life maybe, and give up all these things, but you have the best friends that any human being could ever have. You can look around. It's not like you can think of like one person in the whole world that you could trust your life to. You can think of 10 and 20 and 30 and 50 or even more. So that commitment to truth provides community and sense of warmth and stability. That's such a wonderful thing. So this is why it may not seem like a big deal, telling white lies, but the positive force of truth and honesty is amazing. It's incredible, and really like you to consider that. Okay, I think maybe one more question. Let's see. Simple one, it's a long one.ทำอย่างไรให้การให้อภัยเป็นเรื่องง่ายๆวงเล็บเมื่อเรารู้อยู่เต็มอกว่าคนนี้ผิดแต่เมื่อเวลาผ่านไปเมื่อเรายังไม่ปล่อยเราจึงเหมือนกลายไปเป็นฝ่ายที่ทำผิดเราจึงเหมือนกลายเป็นฝ่ายที่ทำผิดเสียเอง Okay, well, I'm not. I think that there's forgiveness or การให้อภัย is another word that we use so frequently, and yet we don't really stop and ask ourselves, what does it mean to forgive somebody? What do we mean by that? Does anybody have a good definition of forgiveness? What do you mean when you say forgive somebody? What does that involve, forgiving somebody?
Letting go of the thought of revenge.
Yeah, that's good. That's my answer. Yes, I would say it's a very good answer because it was more or less my answer. So we agree. What the point I really like to make is we think like forgiving means that we shouldn't have any hurt feelings, or we should forget, or we shouldn't think about it anymore, or put it behind us, and so on. But what that entails, is often this idea that we should be able to stop feeling in a certain way. We shouldn't. We've forgiven them now means we're not angry anymore. But it's more forgiving somebody is really is on the level of sila or conduct, body and speech. When we forgive somebody, means that we will not harm them. They don't have to worry that we'll take revenge on them, that we'll try to create suffering for them in the future to pay them back. So when it's in the realm of action and speech, it's something that you can just decide, like today, I'm going to forgive them means I'm not going to try to take any kind of revenge or make them feel unhappy in any way. But in terms of the thoughts and the anger and the resentment and so on, you can't just decide not to have those feelings anymore because you've forgiven them. Because willpower doesn't work that way. You can't just make a decision not to feel a certain way anymore, even if it would be good if you could. But it's a practice of meditation or being mindful. When this angry thought comes up, then you recognize it. This is an angry thought. I'm not going to follow this. And you put it down. So it's the effort to let go. It's not actually letting go. That's maybe a long time in the future. But you start off in a practical sense of how you act and how you speak, and then your determination is not to follow and not to indulge in and not to take pleasure in these thoughts of revenge. So if somebody has acted very badly towards you, then it's inevitable you're not going to trust them in the same way. You're not going to feel so comfortable in their presence. And that's the karma that person has created. And I think it's quite normal and natural. If they're someone that you have to meet regularly, socially, then just be with how it is right now. Yeah, it's like this. You don't want to get close to that person anymore, but you're polite to them and you don't create any problems for them. And then just gradually things tend to work out for themselves. Often you just find drifting away. You don't see them so much anymore, and that's all right too. But it's taking care of your mind and not allowing your mind to indulge in and to take pleasure in negative, angry thoughts. But they may still pop up in your mind every now and again. And that's just like an echo from something in the past. Okay, so I think that's enough for this morning. And we've got questions left over for the afternoon session. Also, if anyone has any new questions, then please feel free to add them to the pile.